The following program is intended for educational, informational, and documentary purposes. This episode is based on publicly available court records, archival reporting, historical sources, and criminological analysis. Some scenes, presentation elements, and narrative sequencing have been reconstructed for clarity and continuity. Every effort has been made to accurately represent events based on the material available at the time of production. Any opinions expressed are for analytical purposes only and do not constitute legal advice or formal allegations. All individuals are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. This program contains discussions of real-world violence and mature subject matter. Listener discretion is advised. June 16th, 2009. A father and son are walking along a beach in northwestern Ireland. The morning is calm. The tide is low. The sea stretches out towards the Atlantic, grey and endless. Then they see something lying in the sand. At first it looks like driftwood, or perhaps a discarded bundle of clothing. But as they get closer, they realise it's a man. He's lying on his back. No signs of violence, no obvious injuries, no identification, no wallet, no phone, nothing that might explain who he is. When police arrive, they assume they'll identify him quickly. Most people leave traces: a driver's license, a passport, a hotel reservation, a credit card trail, something. But this man left almost nothing behind. And what investigators eventually discover is even stranger. For the days before his death, he had wandered through the Irish town of Sligo carrying a purple plastic bag. Again and again, security cameras capture him walking out of view. And each time he returned, something was missing. A receipt, a possession, a piece of evidence, a clue. It was as if he was methodically erasing himself from existence. More than a decade later, nobody knows who he really was. Nobody knows why he came to Ireland, and nobody knows what happened during his final days. This is the story of the man who called himself Peter Bergmann. Few mysteries have frustrated investigators quite like the Peter Bergmann case. Unlike many unidentified persons, this isn't a story from the 19th century. This is not a cold case from a time before surveillance cameras. This happened in 2009. Modern Ireland. An age of airports, CCTV systems, digital records, mobile phones, bank transactions, and biometric passports. Theoretically, this should have been one of the easiest unidentified cases in history. Yet, somehow, one man slipped through every crack in the system. To understand what happened, we need to begin in a coastal town called Sligo. Sligo sits on Ireland's northwest coast. It's a place of rugged shorelines, mountains, fishing communities, and dramatic Atlantic scenery. The town has a population of only a few tens of thousands. Visitors come for the beaches, for the hiking, for the history, for peace and quiet. It's not the sort of place where international mysteries usually begin. Yet, in June of 2009, an unknown traveller arrived carrying secrets that would remain hidden long after his death. The first confirmed sighting came on June 12th. A middle-aged man stepped off a bus in Sligo. He appeared ordinary. Nothing about him immediately stood out. He wasn't behaving erratically. He wasn't causing trouble. He looked like any tourist arriving in any town. But investigators would later discover that almost everything about him was carefully constructed. He looked like any tourist arriving in town. But investigators would later discover that almost everything about him was a carefully constructed illusion. Shortly after arriving in town, the man entered the Sligo City Hotel. He approached the front desk and requested a room. The hotel employee asked for his name. He gave one without hesitation. Peter Bergmann. According to the information he provided, he lived in Austria, specifically Vienna. The details sounded plausible. Nothing immediately raised suspicion. After all, thousands of tourists pass through Ireland every year. Why would anyone question a visitor from Austria? The hotel staff checked him in. He paid cash. Again, nothing unusual. Many travellers still used cash in 2009. The man received his room key and headed upstairs. The encounter only lasted minutes. Nobody knew that they had just met one of the most mysterious, unidentified individuals in modern European history. As hotel employees later recalled, the guest appeared to be in his late 50s or early 60s. Some estimates placed him closer to around 65. He stood roughly 6 feet tall. His hair was short and grey. He spoke English fluently. Importantly, witnesses noted something else. He did not seem Austrian. Now, that's not a scientific observation. People can live anywhere. Accents change. Languages are learned. But several individuals who interacted with him felt his speech sounded more British than continental European. This would become one of the many frustrating ambiguities. Every clue pointed somewhere, but never far enough. If there was one object that became central to the mystery, it was a simple purple plastic bag. Throughout his stay in Sligo, the man was repeatedly seen carrying it. Sometimes tucked beneath his arm, sometimes held casually in one hand. At first glance, it seemed insignificant, but investigators would later become obsessed with this bag because of what security cameras appeared to show. The man would leave the hotel carrying items. He would disappear from camera coverage, then return. And every time he came back, there seemed to be fewer belongings. Less evidence, less of himself. At the time, nobody noticed. Only later, when detectives reconstructed his final movements, frame by frame, did the pattern emerge. He wasn't simply walking around town. He appeared to be disposing of possessions. Systematically, deliberately, almost professionally. Over the next several days, Peter Bergmann established a routine. He spent time walking through Sligo. He visited local businesses. He purchased small items. Nothing remarkable, nothing memorable. The kind of behaviour that disappears into the background of everyday life. But security footage tells a different story. Again and again, cameras captured him carrying bags. Again and again, he vanished into areas beyond surveillance coverage. Alleyways, side streets, locations where no cameras existed. When he reappeared, items seemed to have vanished. Investigators eventually reviewed hours of footage. The conclusion was unsettling. The man appeared to be getting rid of his possessions, piece by piece. Yet, despite extensive searches, authorities never located most of what he discarded. Think about that for a moment. A man spends days eliminating evidence of his identity. Investigators know he is doing it. They know roughly when he is doing it. They even know approximately where he is doing it. And yet still, they can't recover what was thrown away. It's one of the most baffling aspects of this entire case. When people first hear this story, they usually jump to the same conclusion. He must have been a criminal, maybe a fugitive, maybe a spy, maybe someone running from the law. It's a tempting theory, but the evidence creates problems. For one thing, there were no indications that police anywhere were actively searching for him. His fingerprints were checked. No matches. His face was circulated internationally. No confirmed identity. His DNA was analysed. Still no answers. If he was hiding from authorities, he was remarkably successful. But perhaps too successful, because even criminals usually leave traces. Associates, family, financial records, something. This man seemed to exist in a strange vacuum, as if he'd stepped into Ireland from nowhere. At one point during his stay, Peter Bergmann mailed several items from the local post office. This immediately caught investigators' attention. Letters create connections, addresses, receipts, relationships, a trail. Surely these mailings would reveal something. Unfortunately, they became another dead end. Authorities never determined who received them, nor did they recover the contents. To this day, nobody knows exactly what was inside. Imagine being the investigator assigned to this case. You know the mystery man mailed something important. You know those items likely connected him to his previous life. And yet the trail simply vanishes. It's another recurring theme in the Bergmann case. Every promising lead dissolves before reaching a conclusion. Then investigators uncovered a detail that would dramatically alter how many people viewed the mystery. During the post-mortem examination, doctors discovered evidence suggesting the man had been seriously ill. Reports indicated he suffered from advanced prostate cancer. There were also indications of other health issues. This revelation changed everything. Suddenly, a different possibility emerged. Maybe Peter Bergmann wasn't running from someone. Maybe he wasn't hiding from authorities. Maybe he was preparing for death. And if that's true, the question becomes even more haunting. Why go to such extraordinary lengths to conceal your identity first? What purpose would it serve? Who was he protecting? Or perhaps, who was he trying to disappear from? By June 15, 2009, Peter Bergmann's time in Sligo was running out. His behaviour became increasingly unusual. Witnesses would later describe strange encounters. Security cameras would capture his final known movements. And within 24 hours, his body would be found on a beach. Why did he travel to Ross's Point? What was missing from the evidence? And why has every major theory failed to fully explain the mystery? The man calling himself Peter Bergmann had spent several days in Sligo, Ireland. He had checked into a hotel under what investigators would later determine was a false identity. He had been seen repeatedly carrying a distinctive purple plastic bag, and security cameras appeared to show him systematically disposing of his belongings. Now the mystery enters the most important phase. The final 24 hours, the last movements, the last sightings, and the last opportunities anyone would have to learn who he really was. Because after this point, the trail goes cold. Almost impossibly cold. Monday, June 15, 2009, Peter Bergmann was preparing to leave the Sligo City Hotel. But before checking out, he makes one final series of movements through town. Investigators later reconstruct his day using witness statements, CCTV footage, and receipts. What emerges is a man who appears calm, focused, purposeful. Not someone acting impulsively, not someone in obvious distress, and certainly not someone who appears confused. This is important, because many mysteries involve people suffering mental health crises or episodes of disorientation. Nothing in Bergmann's behaviour strongly suggests that. Instead, he seems deliberate, almost methodical, as though he is following a plan known only to himself. Around midday, Bergmann checks out of the hotel. Staff later recall that he seemed perfectly normal. Polite, reserved, unremarkable. The kind of guest you probably would forget within hours. Yet, one detail stands out. He leaves behind a significant amount of money. Enough to cover any outstanding expenses. No disputes, no complications, no indication that he intends to return. Again, investigators would later view this as another clue suggesting premeditation. Everything appeared organized, controlled, ordered, the actions of somebody who wants to leave no unfinished business behind. After leaving the hotel, Bergmann heads towards the bus station. At some point, he purchases a ticket. His destination is Rosses Point, a small coastal village located a short distance from Sligo. Today, Rosses Point is known for beautiful beaches, sailing, and spectacular views of the Atlantic Ocean. In June of 2009, it would become the final destination of a man with no confirmed identity. Witnesses later describe him carrying a black shoulder bag. The purple plastic bag is gone. Most of his luggage is gone. Most of his possessions are gone. Only a few items remain. By now, investigators believe he has already disposed of nearly everything that could identify him. One of the final confirmed sightings comes from a local cafe. A witness remembers seeing Bergmann sitting alone. He orders coffee. He appears relaxed. Not hurried, not agitated, not frightened. The image is striking. Imagine knowing that your life may be nearing its end. Imagine carrying whatever secret Peter Bergmann carried. And yet, sitting quietly in a cafe as though it were any ordinary afternoon. Witnesses later say nothing seemed unusual about him. No dramatic final words, no emotional breakdown, no visible panic. Just solidarity, a man drinking coffee. Waiting. For what? Nobody knows. Later that day, Bergmann hires a taxi. The driver transports him towards Rosses Point. Years later, the driver would still remember the encounter. Not because anything dramatic happened, but because investigators eventually contacted everyone who had crossed paths with the mystery man. According to reports, Bergmann engaged in ordinary conversation. He reportedly commented on the beauty of the area. Again, nothing unusual. No confession, no explanation, no clue. Just another interaction. At the time, seemed completely ordinary. The driver drops him off. Bergmann walks away, and the mystery enters its final chapter. Rosses Point Beach stretches along Ireland's Atlantic coast. Beautiful, opened, windswept. The sort of place people visit to clear their minds. As evening approaches, Bergmann is seen in the area. This is among the final confirmed sightings. Witnesses report seeing a man matching his description walking along the shoreline. Nothing appears alarming. Nothing appears urgent. But by the following morning, he will be dead. June 16, around 6:45 in the morning, a father and son are walking along the beach. As they move along the shoreline, they notice something ahead. A body. A man lying on the sand. Emergency services are called immediately, but there is nothing they can do. The man is already dead. Authorities quickly determine that this is the same individual who recently stayed in the Sligo City Hotel under the name Peter Bergmann. At first glance, the scene appears peaceful. No obvious signs of violence, no evidence of a struggle, no indication of robbery, no indication of homicide. Yet, the circumstances are deeply strange. Because once again, this man has almost no identifying possessions. No passport, no wallet, no driver's license. Nothing. When pathologists begin their examination, the case becomes even more puzzling. First, they discover evidence of serious illness. The man appears to have advanced prostate cancer. There are indications of significant health problems affecting multiple systems in his body. Yet, despite these conditions, he had remained mobile, independent, capable of travelling, capable of carrying out whatever plan brought him to Ireland. Investigators also note that he appears relatively well groomed. His clothing is clean. His appearance is neat. This does not resemble someone living rough or wandering aimlessly. Instead, he appears to have maintained himself carefully, almost intentionally, as though presentation still mattered, even at the end. One of the most surprising findings involves what investigators do not discover. No major trauma, no stab wounds, no gunshot wounds, no evidence of a violent attack, no signs suggesting another person was directly involved. This immediately eliminates many theories, at least the obvious ones. The cause of death is ultimately determined to be acute cardiac arrest. In simple terms, his heart stopped. But this answer creates almost as many questions as it resolves. Because cardiac arrest describes how someone died, not necessarily why they died, investigators still need to understand what circumstances led to that moment. And that's where things become complicated. As forensic investigators continue examining the body and clothing, they notice something extraordinary. Many clothing labels have been removed. Not torn accidentally, removed intentionally. Again, deliberately, systematically. The pattern appears throughout the case. Fake identity, missing documents, discarded possessions, removed labels. Everything points toward a single objective: concealment. The question is no longer whether Peter Bergmann wanted to hide his identity. The evidence overwhelmingly suggests he did. The question remains, why? The first major theory investigators consider is suicide. On the surface, it seems plausible. A seriously ill man travels to a distant location, removes evidence of his identity, settles his affairs, spends several final days alone, then dies. Many observers immediately see a connection. Perhaps he came to Ireland intending to end his life. Perhaps he wanted to spare family members the burden of witnessing a prolonged illness. Perhaps he wanted privacy. Perhaps he wanted control. Yet, the theory has problems. Significant problems. No obvious suicide method is identified. No note is found. No explanation is left behind. And despite extensive investigation, authorities never uncover a clear mechanism that would explain a planned death. The theory remains possible, but not proven. And as the years pass, alternative explanations begin to emerge. Normally, investigators solve mysteries by working backward. Identify the victim, contact relatives, examine relationships, study financial records, review communications, build a timeline. But in this case, there is no starting point, because nobody knows who Peter Bergmann really is. Every path circles back to the same wall. Identity unknown, history unknown, family unknown, country of origin unknown, and perhaps most remarkably, no one ever publicly comes forward and says, "That's my father, that's my brother, that's my husband, that's my friend." Nobody. It's as though the man vanished from the human record entirely. By the end of 2009, investigators had fingerprints, DNA, dental records, photographs, witness statements, CCTV footage, an autopsy, and yet they still couldn't answer the most basic question: who was Peter Bergmann? You've been listening to Criminology Files. Producing these deep dives takes significant time and research. If you find value in our work, please take a moment to subscribe and leave us a review. For case updates and behind-the-scene content, follow us on Instagram at Criminology Files. We'll see you next week. Good night.